Okay, I think we're going to get going. On behalf of Matt Hill and I, co-editors of the NPPR this year on cannabis and cannabinoids, Synapse Society, we really like to welcome you here, and we're very happy to be talking about this field. This is a very broad topic, and we hope we're providing interesting data for neurobiologists, preclinical, clinical researchers, epidemiologists. We're really covering the whole swath. So we're going to begin the plenary session at the level of the Synapse, and I do have to highlight our first speaker, Jaddeep Bains, who did a heroic thing. Our first speaker, Dr. Marsicano, was unable to make it here from Bordeaux, and at the very last minute, Dr. Bains filled in, so we're very grateful for that. So he's going to be talking about endocannabinoids and plasticity, I believe, and mitochondrial and CB1. No mitochondrial CB1. Followed by Joseph Cheer, who's going to be talking about endocannabinoids and reward and reinforcement. Then Ziva Cooper and Sachin Patel are going to be talking on a more translational level about the data from preclinical and clinical overview of sex differences from Ziva Cooper and the preclinical and clinical effects of cannabis and endocannabinoid signaling systems and the pathogenesis of PTSD. And then finally, we're going to end with epidemiology with Debbie Hassan, who's going to really cover all the important changes we've seen with these changing regulations with state-by-state laws on cannabis. And just the last thing I'd like to mention is just the timeliness of this topic on so many levels. So in terms of the neurobiology, the changes and the growth we've seen in the past 2 decades has been astonishing, really understanding the influence of the endocannabinoid system on a host of physiological processes. But on a public policy level, it's just been also astonishing how every election cycle there are changes in cannabis regulations. So currently, Canada has legalized not just medical use, but recreational use. Each state in the United States has very different rules and regulations about the recreational or therapeutic use of cannabis. And the public has an enormous interest in the potential medical and psychiatric benefits of cannabis, but the careful scientific exploration remains highly constrained in the United States. So there are incredible regulatory hurdles to studying cannabis in a carefully controlled way in the United States. It's a Schedule I drug, meaning it has the highest level of regulation. It's a drug with high abuse liability and no medical benefit. That's the definition of a Schedule I drug. And the DEA was debating whether to change this to a Schedule II drug, which would greatly open our ability to test it in clinical populations. But they decided not to because there isn't enough medical evidence to support this change. Yet we can't really get this good medical evidence with its Schedule I status. So as a cannabis researcher, with all the regulatory pieces in place, doing these carefully conducted studies is harder than it ever has been, even when we need it the most. So it's a frustrating time for this very timely topic. Ideally, the dissemination of the evidence surrounding cannabis and cannabinoids will influence public policy in the near future. I can only hope. So I'll just end this with asking you to please not take any pictures, and I'll introduce Matt Hill. And please look at his shirt that he designed of a cannabineuron. It's very, very cool.
Okay, Meg took a little bit of my glory away with that. Thanks. So I'm just going to follow up. I want to say, so there are the special issues that are out in the hallway, I believe. They're at all the exit doors as you come out. There'll be tables. We did work on this, the artwork that we commissioned, which thanks to I think originally was a facetious comment by John Neumeier, which then ended up turning into reality, where we decided to make the shirts up with the logo to kind of advertise the issue. So I'm the walking ad for the day. But I'd encourage you to get it because it really is a very interesting issue. And I think, as Meg said, this is really timely. Like, I don't know how well-intentioned that was, if we really realized. I mean, this was a couple of years ago when this topic was chosen and set up. And certainly at that point, I don't think, I'm a Canadian, I don't think we realized that even in Canada we would have had legalization going through. And now we've got a matter of months before it will actually be federally legal in Canada. So there's a lot of interest in this, certainly in the Canadian sphere, and I think certainly throughout various states going on. And I think, as Meg said, with the advances in both the basic neuroscience, this field has been around now. It's actually relatively new in the world of neuroscience because we've only really understood the basic components of the endocannabinoid system for probably about 30 years, maybe at max at this point. And so there's a lot of information that we're gleaning in as technology advances. We're learning a lot more about that basic side of it. But then as we move up the ladder, there is finally, I think, hopefully some hurdles coming down. So people like Meg and other researchers doing this in the human populations can actually start answering more questions in a scientific manner, where we can, instead of just kind of shrugging and saying we don't know, we actually will be able to say something hopefully soon. Okay, so with that, I think we'll just segue right into the beginning of the session, which we kind of chose the talks for the session to be a nice representation of what the panel is. So we literally are going from synapses up to society. And so our first speaker today, as Meg said, is Jadip Bains. He's a colleague of mine at the University of Calgary, so another Canadian. He was co-authors with Giovanni Marsicano on the opening article in the issue, which was kind of overviewing the complexity of how endocannabinoids function in the brain, which is a lot more complicated than we would have thought, say, 20 years ago, when the original system was kind of envisioned as a circuit breaker, and now we realize there's a lot of other roles going on. So without further ado, I'll introduce Jadip Bains to come up, and he's going to start off at the synaptic level, and as Meg said, throughout the day, we're going to move up. So, Jadip.